Hello again, my little conscripts, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, we are going to be casting our ever-critical eye over another 10th edition Imperial Guard Codex datasheet. And today, we are going to be deep diving what very well may be my favourite vehicle in all of Warhammer 40k. The workhorse of the Guard and one of our most iconic units. It is the venerable Chimera. And so, without further ado, let's not mess around today. Let's mount up, roll out, and drive right into this thing. As is tradition, let us begin with a cheeky gander at the Chimera's stat line. Firstly, we have the movement value of 10 inches. This is perfectly reasonable for a guard armoured vehicle. This puts it in line with a lot of our other units such as Leman Russes and Rogal Dawns. It is a little bit slower than really fast transports like the Taurox and the Taurox Prime, but it's fast enough to get the infantry there quickly and safely. One thing to mention though is that depending on the terrain that you're playing on, you may find that it's more of the latter than the former, that your infantry actually getting to the objective rather than getting there any quicker than if they were just foot slogging across the board. The reason for this is that most infantry can just go straight through terrain. They don't have to go around it like the Chimera does. And so if you've got a lot of L-shaped ruins, you may find that with all of the pivoting and the going around them, you actually end up basically going the same distance if you just walk 6 inches as the crow flies. But the big difference is that you've gone the same distance forward, but your infantry inside a nice big metal box with lots of guns rather than just exposed out in the open. And it is a pretty safe box to be in, the Chimera. Toughness 9 with a 3+ save, and very importantly, 11 wounds is going to make this a bit of a nightmare for your opponents to have to deal with, because it's just tough enough that it's going to require proper dedicated anti-tank, which means that every time your opponent is shooting their las cannon or las cannon equivalents at your Chimeras, they're not shooting them at what might be a bigger, more tempting target like a Leman Russ or a Rogal Dawn. You might think, well, why wouldn't they just shoot those anyway? Because Chimeras driving onto objectives and starting to pour infantry out onto them is really, really effective for securing those primary objectives. And so your opponent might be forced to waste proper anti-tank on a Chimera when they'd much rather be going after those bigger tanks that are then going to start hurting them. So it creates a bit of a dilemma for your opponent. Now, I highlighted the 11 wounds a moment ago, and I just want to deep dive that for a second. Having 11 wounds is a pretty big deal because often it means that your Chimera is going to take that little bit of extra firepower for your opponent to destroy. Think about it for a moment. If your opponent is shooting you with a bunch of damage 2 shots, let's say it's those heavy bolt guns that the Votan have on all of their vehicles, it's going to take an extra shot to kill your Chimera. Instead of 5, it's going to take 6. And it's this kind of firepower which is often directed towards Chimeras because your opponent is trying to use the big anti-tank elsewhere. And the amount of times that, because my Chimera's got 11 wounds, it has survived on 1 wound. Let me tell you, I've lost count. It happens all the time in casual games, in competitive games. And here's the thing. The Chimera doesn't degrade. A lot of vehicles in 40k, a lot of vehicles and monsters, when they reach a certain threshold, when they've lost a certain amount of wounds, they start being -1 to hit. The Chimera doesn't degrade. So whether it's on 1 wound or 11 wounds, it's basically operating at peak capability. And that extra wound there is so good at keeping your Chimera active and annoying. Moving on to the last 2 bits on the stat line, we've got leadership of 7+. This isn't great. It's not terrible, but it's not great. It's like 3.6. The thing is, your Chimera is generally going to be low priority for orders and stratagems. When you've got a limited amount of tank orders in your list, you're probably going to put those on things like Rogal Dawns and Leman Russes. Probably not going to bother with it on the Chimera. And likewise, with not being able to put stratagems on a battleshock unit, you're probably going to put those on bigger boom units. So leadership 7 isn't great, and you probably will fail at like a key point, sod's law. But it's also not massively limiting, as this unit is relatively low priority for a lot of stuff that gets affected by Battleshock. As for the objective control, don't completely dismiss that. It might only seem like a couple of pips of OC, but remember your Chimera is going to be pushing onto objectives. And there's going to be plenty of times when you might be tying for OC on an objective, and then you remember, oh yeah, my Chimera gives me 2 extra OC over here, and it might flip the objective over to you. Because it's a frontline unit, like with infantry, OC is an important stat. It is very important here as well. But let's move on from its stat line and take a look at its weapons and war gear. Starting off, the Chimera comes equipped with a multi-laser, heavy bolter, lasgun array, and armored tracks. You can swap out the whole heavy bolter for a heavy flamer, and you can swap out the multi-laser, which is the weapon in the turret, with a heavy bolter and a heavy flamer. Personally, when it comes to picking which weapons your Chimera should have, you always want to go for either double heavy bolter or double heavy flamer. It's kind of like with heavy weapon teams. We covered this in the heavy weapon teams videos. You don't want to be mixing and matching weapons. You want to be having weapons that complement each other. And so double heavy bolter or double heavy flamer tends to specialize this vehicle and keeps its firepower homogeneous and standardized. Which option you go for, it is personal preference. Some people will swear by the double heavy flamer, others will swear by the double heavy bolter. For me, I think it comes down to which detachment I'm going to be in and if there's any other units in my list that might have some overlap. So if I'm putting a lot of like hellhounds into my army, I'm probably less likely to go for heavy flamers because like, okay, I've got the flame tanks kind of covered. I might need some longer range Daka here. But if I am wanting to put hellhounds into my list, but I'm struggling to find the points for it, if I've already got a bunch of chimeras in there, I might go, well, you know what? I'll have a bunch of pseudo hellhounds and I'll go for the double heavy flamer. I think the big deciding factor, though, is the detachment. If you're going combined arms, I think you go double heavy bolter every single time because then that's leaning into the fact that you can generate lethal hits from a long range with those heavy bolters. Outside of combined arms, I can definitely see and can definitely be persuaded towards double heavy flamer being the go-to loadout. The one weapon you want to avoid like the plague is the multi-laser. And let's take a look why. Essentially, it does have an extra shot and it does have an extra pip of strength, but it has 0 AP and it's only damage 1. If you compare this to the heavy bolter, which fires 3 shots, but then also has sustained hits, so will often actually get as many shots as the multi-laser. And then, sure, it's only strength 5, but let me tell you, there's basically no difference between strength 6 and strength 5. And for that very negligible increase in strength, you get an extra pip of AP and you get 2 damage. And even if you argue, well, AP 0 versus AP -1 isn't such a big deal because of things like the benefit of cover, the sustained hits plus the damage 2 is just so much better. Multi-lasers are just a bit trash. Anytime you see a multi-laser on a vehicle, whether it's a Chimera, a Sentinel, or a Valkyrie, if you can swap it out for something else, you should always swap it out for something else. As for the heavy flamer, yes, it may have a much shorter range and the shots might be kind of swingy, but it ignores cover and it automatically hits. And so that makes this great for flushing enemy light infantry out of cover. It's just good for just washing down pretty much anything in Prometheum. And also it does make for a good Overwatch target as well. Being able to Overwatch with double flamer Chimera can cause your opponent to have pause for thought. As for the other weapons that we can put on a Chimera, you can choose between a heavy stubber and a storm bolter, and you can just take a hunter killer missile. You don't have to trade anything out for it. You can just take one. So always go for the hunter killer. It's literally free real estate. As for the stubber versus storm bolter, stubber every day of the week. This is because A, stubbers are cool and you can go, get on that 50! Somebody get on that 50! But also the fact that it's just better. So it's got the same strength, AP, and damage. The heavy stubber and the storm bolter, they've got the same stats here, same ballistic skill. But the stubber has longer range and has more shots to start off with and has a better rapid fire half range and has more rapid fire shots. There's literally no point putting a Stormbolter on a Chimera. It's sad, but there's no point in doing it. This is one of the victims of all war gear essentially being made free. Back in the day, Stormbolters used to be cheaper than Heavy Stubbers, so there was an argument that you could save a few points by putting Stormbolters on them. Now, you should always go for the Heavy Stubbers. So, to summarize then, because I know I've thrown a lot of information at you guys, when it comes to picking your Chimera weapons, you always want to be going double Heavy Bolter or double Heavy Flamer. You tend to want to lean towards double Heavy Bolter in a combined arms attachment. Outside of combined arms, and depending on what else is in your list, you're probably going to go for the double Heavy Flamer. You should always be taking the Heavy Stubber, and you should always be taking the Hunter Killer Missile. Personally, my default Chimera loadout is double Heavy Bolter, Heavy Stubber, and also Hunter Killer Missile. But there's one weapon we've not talked about yet, and this one isn't optional. Every Chimera comes with it. It is the Lasgun Array. I actually really like the Lasgun Array. It essentially is those 6 Lasguns that are on the sides of the Chimera. It's rapid fire 6, 24-inch range, 6 shots. So if you are within 12 inches, that is going to be 12 shots from this thing. In combined arms, that can actually start generating a surprising amount of lethal hits. Yes, the rest of its profile is very Lasgun, but it almost doesn't matter. If you're shooting this at some sort of enemy vehicle with a 3-up save, more often than not, you'll find the Lasgun Array does chip off a wound here and there. It's pretty decent. One quick note on the Lasgun Array for Veteran Guard players. You no longer need people inside the Chimera to fire the Lasgun Arrays. In previous editions, you needed to have people inside the Chimera. They were the ones operating the Lasgun Arrays. Now, that's not the case. So, the Chimera can be completely empty and you still get to fire the Lasguns. Moving on from the weapons, let's take a look at the abilities of this vehicle. Now let's get into the abilities. We've got Deadly Demise D3, pretty normal for a vehicle of this size, but we've also got Firing Deck 2, which is very tasty. This allows you to supplement or complement the existing weapons on the Chimera. A lot of people like to take Catachans inside Chimeras, and having a Chimera which has got 2 heavy flamers as part of its own weapons, and then having a couple of flamers that can shoot out of the top, makes for a really nice pseudo Hellhound. You've also got the opportunity to put some higher AP weapons inside the Chimera and to take advantage of that firing deck. You could have a heavy weapons squad which can shoot a las cannon out the top. Quick side note, but you can no longer shoot 2 heavy weapon teams out the top of one Chimera. That is covered on the heavy weapon team's datasheet. So you still fire 1 las cannon out the top, or if you've got something like Cadians or Kriegers in there, you could be firing a plasma gun and a melter gun. Those weapons are certainly extra to what the Chimera normally gets and gives it a bit more AP and a bit more punch. The signature ability of the Chimera is Mobile Command Vehicle. In your command phase, one officer model embarked within this transport can issue orders even though it is not on the battlefield. When doing so, measure distances to and from this transport. This is a very fluffy, very cool ability. It really does lean into the narrative of the Chimera, and there's loads of examples in lore, like in Kiefer's Kane and other Black Library books, where the mobile command vehicle element of the Chimera has been like really cool and really important. It's something that is emphasized. Sadly, it's not actually very good. Firstly, if you're using an infantry officer embarked inside the Chimera, he's not got access to a Master Vox. Even if he's a command squad, he still can't use the Master Vox. So, because it's officer model, not officer unit. That's the key wording there. So basically, an officer inside a Chimera can only order 6 inches. It's kind of silly. It's very limited. Master Vox is such a go-to piece of equipment for so many guard commanders for a reason. Being able to issue orders from such long distances can be game-changing, game-winning. In fact. So yeah, you do get a slightly bigger footprint because a Chimera is a relatively large metal box, but it's nowhere near as good as having access to a Master Vox. And it's also limited to your command phase. So it would be perfect if you could do this in any phase. If it was a bit like Kazakin Warrior Elite, in any phase, one officer model embarked with the transport can issue orders even though it's not on the battlefield. But because it's limited to the command phase, well, what's going to happen? you're going to try and issue orders using mobile command vehicle to maybe some other infantry that are also embarked inside Chimeras. If you're going down like a mechanized route, and now you can't because the infantry you're trying to order is also inside their own transport, so they can't be targeted for it. So what this leads to is you drive your Chimeras forward, you disembark your infantry, you disembark your officer, and then he can do his orders normally, but then he's not taking advantage of mobile command vehicle. So it's just a bit of a rubbish one. There are a few ways you can make it work, like if you're going fluffy and you're having like a command squad inside a Chimera, but then you've got a massive Vox that you're not using, so it just doesn't make sense. Then it just doesn't work. There's loads of ways you can try and make this work, but rarely does it work. You can build into it. You can have like Creed safe inside a Chimera and all this kind of stuff, but honestly, this needs to be FAQ. This needs to be changed to at the start of any of your phases. And then I think it will make the mobile command vehicle actually a really good rule, because it means that the officer can stay inside the Chimera and order infantry that are disembarking, and it gives this actual purpose. But that's really the only fly in the ointment, and I am fully open to having my mind changed on that. So if you think that I've overlooked mobile command vehicle and you think I'm being a bit harsh on it, let me know what you think down in the comment section. Last but certainly not least, in fact probably most important about the Chimera, is it's a transport. And it can transport up to 12 Astra Militarum infantry models. These can be any Astra Militarum infantry models. They can be Ogryn, they can be Katachans, they can be Kriegers, they can be Scions, they can be Kazakin, they can be anything. If it's got the infantry keyword, it can go in here. Now it's important to note that it says infantry models, not infantry units. So no, you can't attach Lord Solar and try and squash him and his horse inside a Chimera. It doesn't work like that. Sadly not. And it can never transport any artillery models either. And it's important to note that Ogryn do take up 3 spaces. So the max Ogryn you'll probably have in here is going to be either 3 or 4. Probably going to be 3 because of the way that points work in 40k. If you put 4 Ogryn in here, you don't pay for 4 Ogryn, you pay for 6 Ogryn, because Ogryn come with a unit cost of 1 to 3 or a unit cost of 4 to 6. The big question is what goes inside a Chimera. And honestly, anything. One of the greatest advantages of the Chimera is that it's so ubiquitous. It's so flexible. Almost any infantry unit that you put inside it is going to benefit from it. If you want some durable scouting units that are kind of cheap, you would put 5 engineers in here, or you would put 5 Katachans in here. They're going to be able to scout 4-6 inches, and then the Chimera is going to be able to move for 10 inches, and they are going to be able to, like we said, especially the Katachans, are going to be able to start being like pseudo hellhounds. They can start being a real pain in the ass for your opponent to deal with. Or if you need something that's a little bit more take all comers, do a little bit of everything, jack of all trades, you're not sure what scenario you want or what scenario you're going to encounter, but you know that you're going to want your infantry to be mech'd up. Maybe you've got a bunch of Kriegers or a bunch of Cadians. They will benefit from being in here. They will just benefit from the added durability of the Chimera. Perhaps you've got some high value infantry like Scions or like Kazakin. Kazakin love Chimeras. Kazakin love Tauroxes, don't get me wrong, but Kazakin love Chimeras because you get the firepower of the Kazakin plus the scout of the Kazakin in a nice, neat package, which can go inside the Chimera. And unlike the Taurox, which when it's delivered the Kazakin, basically its firepower is negligible, the Chimera can actually deliver the Kazakin and then actually provide them with some quite significant additional firepower, especially if those are heavy bolters with lethal hits. Me personally, I always tend to find myself putting Katachans inside Chimeras or putting Kazakin inside Chimeras. They tend to be my 2 go-to default units if I'm not sure what I want, but I know I'm going to go down the mech route. Now, I mentioned the Taurox there, and I do just want to do a quick lightning comparison of the Chimera to the Taurox and the Taurox Prime. So the Taurox is faster, and a lot of people would argue that because of the ability for the Taurox to advance and for your infantry still to get out and shoot and pairing that with things like the Hammer of the Emperor attachment, so you can go really fast and start blasting, the Taurox is a better transport. And I wouldn't deny that. I think with specific tactics in mind, with specific jobs in mind, the Taurox is more of a specialist. Likewise with the Taurox Prime, I think that it's definitely a specialist unit. And Scions naturally benefit from that because you can regain your Scion reroll to hits of the index. You can do that in the codex, and so you can have reroll to hits and reroll to wounds. The Chimera, the advantage it has is that it's a little bit cheaper than the Taurox Prime, although it is more expensive than the Taurox. But it's not a specialist. It's a generalist. And it is a vehicle that is able to be put into your list, and no matter the situation that you encounter, it will be able to handle itself. Now, I do just want to expand on that point a little bit, because when I've talked about like heavy weapon teams, I've mentioned about, specialists are better than it's better to whole ass one thing than half ass many things. This is different. With the Chimera, it's one of those units which is able to pull its weight in any situation. It may not have been the best tool for the job, but it's never going to let you down either. It's a generalist, but it's a positive generalist. It's a generalist, but it's not diluted. If you would start putting a multi-laser on and a storm bolter and a heavy flame, at that point you're starting to be diluting its capabilities like you would if you put 3 different heavy weapons on a heavy weapon team. But one of the Chimera's greater strengths is similar to that of the Lemurus battle tank, which is that it's never the best job, never the best tool for the job, but it can always do the job. And that's not just true for 10th edition. That has been true for this thing's entire existence. There have been editions where, like now, where the Taurox is better, and there have been editions where the Taurox Prime has been better, and there have been editions where infantry has been more powerful than mechanized. But at no point has a Chimera in someone's list been an actively terrible and bad choice. They're always relevant, they're always decent, and they're basically future-proofed. And it's for that reason why so many guard commanders default to the Chimera. Because rules come and go, additions change, metas shift. But the Chimera and its ability to be a really good generalist, to be able to handle anything, means that no matter how the world changes around you, no matter how the lists and how the meta changes around you, you're always going to be able to rely upon it to be able to do a decent job and to have decent capabilities. Well, at least that's what I think. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Are you Team Taurox or are you still on Team Chimera? And what are your thoughts on that mobile command vehicle thing? Was I too harsh, or do you think it is a little bit useless? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to go ahead and smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.